Their images are painted on the rock, but the spirit lives in the monsoon clouds. They are the Wandjina. The last true guardians of the Kimberley. They are the spirit of the rain and falling water. Jack Dale was born in the bush on Mount House Station. His mother, Madeira, was an indigenous woman. Jack's father, Jack Dale, a frontiersman according to oral accounts, was a hard-living man. Reputedly, he died as violently as he lived, and in his remains they were placed in the hot Kimberley earth with little ceremony or sorrow. Following the death of his father, he grew up in the bush with his mother's father. During this time, he learned a lot about the traditional law, Mengenen.
I got up with a Mustang there with our pleasure. I was stumping weed together for a couple of years. And then when I left there, I went back home, back to Mount House Station where I come from. That's the way I worked. And I was most of the time. Good old life.
After a visit to Jack's camp, I bring photographs from the last trip, and Jack is most excited to see these, and also Biddy, and they place them inside their photo album. Junba is a dance that is traditional to Mengenen and other indigenous people of the Kimberley, as it continues to play an important role in the lives of senior people who were also the backbone of the Kimberley cattle industry in its days. Junba is like many things. It is a continuous link to the past. It celebrates the great deeds of the ancestors. Like all dance and theatre, Junba is a means of communication and moral instruction. And on some occasions, they can be simply well-crafted entertainment and mischievous humour. Jack is a compulsive drawer, especially of maps, in a feverish bid to record the significant sites of his country, which he still does today, as a tool employed to explain his more elaborate paintings. He has been painting now for 7 years, and since the year 2000 he has a total of 6 solo exhibitions. The knowledge Jack has of his land in the Kimberley is outstanding, but understandable considering the many hundreds of kilometres he has footwalked with his grandfather, surveying his country of Imigi, Bell Gorge, the Leopold Ranges, Mengenen country, the language Jack speaks. These Wandjinas come from Oyondra, my grandfather's home. They are proof of my ownership of land. These are from the proper dreaming place. Guttiers have got the Bible stories, but we have our Wandjina. I painted these paintings in the title to land from the government. If we do not go and look at these places, we are empty people. We have to go to the places in a Toyota. We have to make the Wandjina look flash with good dots and red colour. The rock pigeons carried seed to the Wandjina sites, and also yams. In many of the art sites alongside, the Wandjina eats this food. Wandjinas originated in the dreaming and are associated with the rolling nimbus clouds, which herald the approach of the wet season. They control the rain, the storms, the cyclones, and lightning, and are also responsible for life and death of all things. The Wandjina comes from a place where the old people sang songs and danced every year. It was to make sure that the emus would have lots of chicks, and there would be plenty of food to make them big and fat. We keep these places secret so nothing bad will happen to them. Some stories say the Wandjina is said to once have a mouth, and indeed some old people still paint the mouth on occasions. But the Wandjina's lips are closed tightly when the first lightning bolt struck. They never reopened. In some Warwara and Narragain areas, Ubud the rainbow snake is said to have sealed the lips of the Wandjina. Many say that if the figures were repainted with lips, it would rain constantly, so it cannot be done. They only make a slight mmm sound, which is associated with the wind approaching and the beginning of the wet season. Edna Dale, Jack's daughter, and her husband Lance Bedford helped Jack with dotting and finishing on the large paintings. This practice is quite common with artists across Australia. Mr. Coate was a missionary man with medical training and was good at learning indigenous languages. Although quite small in stature, Mr. Coate was very tough and wiry. He did a lot of hard physical work in the bush alongside the blackfellas. The traditional people had a great respect for the way Mr. Coate lived with them in the bush. He walked with the old people on big journeys across the country, hunted and shared bush tucker.
This is the way we used to come to church here. This is our church, the Presbyterian church for Mr. Coate. Mr. Coate put this church up, and Mr. Pogana, David Pogana, all those people. Mr. Coate was the first one to put this church up here, and he was a really good man. Good missionary we had, Mr. Coate, very true. This is the way we used to come to him in church. He used to come from Derby, from the town. He'd come from town. We have churches here every Sunday. And that's a hay sail flat that goes to Arawaddy, at the top of the Mengenen, going to St. Morgali. So, sandstone, Kulangin, Mengenen, Kaljambab, Junwanya, Billigan Camp.
Arawaddy. This is a story of a mob of people who tried to make their country bigger. They came from a big blue hill near Turkey Creek and travelled across the country into our land near Bell Gorge. They asked our big boss Wandjina, Amala, for more land. My Wandjina said no. He said, "These are the Wurundjeri people. Lay down your spears," and they said no. So Amala called up all the other Wandjinas and said, "We will fight for your land, and we will fight for this land which belongs to us." They all gathered for a battle. My Wandjina won the fight and took away their spears. They then had nothing to fight with. Amala then killed all the Wurundjeri and put them into a big heap and swallowed them in his guts. Inside his belly they all began to grow into eggs, bigger and bigger. After some time his belly button broke off and all the eggs burst out and rolled across the country. Then they all cracked open and they crawled out. But they looked different. birds, snakes and goannas. They then returned home through Mornington Station to Fitzroy and onto Tin Bay in the tableland. But they were very cunning and never returned home. It's important people don't take over other people's land. Jack Dale's paintings are never merely pictures of the country, they are the country. He had the reputation of a very rugged stockman and skilled bushman, which often precedes the tough and hard-working life he has had, and which moulds him into the man he is today. He was taught traditional lore of the Ngarrindjeri and the dreaming stories of his land he now paints. Jack is painting Djallala, the marking stones. These signal stones are a reminder to a person that they are approaching a sacred site or a taboo cave. These stones are sometimes placed near the paintings of Wandjinas. If you are not familiar with this country, you can follow the stones to the Wandjina site. The marker stones are also a boundary between a clan's country. The Djallala are markers from the dreaming, and people should stay inside these boundaries. The images of Djallala are painted with broad brushstrokes, painted in circular shapes and infilled with many different colours. Sometimes they're in a diamond shape, sometimes they're quite irregular, but this is the sort of painting that Jack prefers to do now. Some of the shapes also represent Woodgood, the waterholes, a place where children are dreamt about and named. I remember one account of a woman going to one of these sacred waterholes and looking into the water. She saw an image of her child before it was born, and this child was dreamt about that night, and the child took on a totemic name of an animal, and this happened to be a fruit bat which was called Bungle. She then had a child and called this child Bungle. Wandjinas also created the Woongood places, which to each Ngarrindjeri person belongs. Jack paints these large Wandjinas found in many sites, but in particular Iandra near Bell Gorge, which is the home of the Djallala, and there are many Djallalas placed in the ground. There are also a marking stone from one's border to another border, from Ngarrindjeri to Waiora, etc. Jack is often visited by his daughter and his 5 grandchildren. One particular grandchild loves painting, and Jack loves to sit with his grandchildren on the floor. He spends much time with the kids, teaching them to paint the stories of the country. And maybe this little girl will be a good painter in the future, and Jack certainly hopes so, because that is the future. Dua, the devil bird. The home of Dua is at a cave in Glenroy Station. If children go out at night time and they hear this sort of a swishing sort of sound, it is Dua, the devil bird, coming to get them. He will fly down and pick them up in his claws, transfer them to his balls, and carry them to his cave where he has a wife who would bash their brains out. We have very similar stories about Boogeyman, and as a child I can remember the Boogeyman stories, and I wouldn't go out at night time either because he'd put his hand out and grab my leg and pull me out under the house. So we all have forms of control on children, and this is one form of control that the Aboriginal people have in this part of the land.
Just coming across from over the ranges, walked them right into Derby here. That's what they've done. With a horse in the lead, and 2 police boys behind with a horse. Bring them into Derby. Walk them all the way right into Derby. Riders came there the next day, they take them into boat, sent them into Fremantle.
When I was a young boy during the mid-1930s, I lived with my grandfather in the Rangers country to get away from the police and their trackers and the pastoralists. From our hideouts high up in the ranges, we saw many groups of prisoners in the neck chain, making their way to Derby under police escort. We saw this group from our hideout in Mount Hart Ranges. They were probably on their way from Munja to Derby or to Broome to be put before a magistrate. A lot of people were sent to southern jails like Fremantle and Rottnest Island, where it was too cold for the people. The Ticket Men is a painting about men walking back to their country after they're released from jail. The placing of tickets around their neck by the police, who were also the protectors of Aborigines, was a cruel trick played on men who could not read or write. The men thought the tickets were like a uniform or a badge of authority. Instead, the tickets had written on them a summary of the men's offences against the pastoral industry, and that they were shameless troublemakers in need of a good whipping or perhaps shooting. The big one, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, there's photos in there, but we were talking about that particular one that you have in the gallery. Here with us tonight, who've come all the way down from the Kimberley, especially for this show. And we're also very proud to have Alan Dodge, the director of the State Gallery, here to the West Australian State Gallery, here to open this exhibition officially for Japinga Gallery tonight. So I'll pass you on to Alan, and if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to ask me or David or indeed speak directly to Jack or Biddy if there's anything you want to ask. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ian. Well, what do you say, except I'm very honoured to be asked to open the show of Biddy's and Jack's, and thank you so much, Jack and Biddy, for bringing your work down. It's beautiful. But what I really want to say is I was in this country for 24 years before I ever saw the Kimberley. And anyone who's been to the Kimberley is never the same again, I think, afterwards. It is so stunning. It's such amazing country. And every time I see Jack's work and Biddy's work, it just reconjures up to me the feelings that I had when I was there. And what Jack has done in particular in this show is told a lot of stories. And I hope you've had a look at his poop sheet there, because it tells you all about where those stories come from. The inventiveness in forms and the fact that it has such a freshness to it, I find very, very exciting. But most of all, it's great to have such a senior lawman with us, and the fact that Jack actually is custodian of so many important sites, and that he shares it with us in these works. And so, rather than rattle on, I just want to say it is an honor, and Jack and Biddy, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoy looking at the works as much as I have this evening. I snuck in early. So I think that's all we need to say, except that I do open the show with great glee. So enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Who's the member of the Central Kimberley Pilbara, and Tom has the biggest electorate going around, I think, but very kindly he's made time to say a few words of introduction for Jack, and Tom's a fairly tireless supporter of people in his electorate, of artists, of Aboriginal communities, and so I'd just like to call on Tom Stevens to say a few words.
Thanks very much for that. It's a great privilege, Jack and family, on behalf of everyone here and the wider audience and viewers that will no doubt get the chance to see this art, to say thanks to Jack and his family for presenting his vision of his landscape, of his people, of his country in the way that he has. This particular display tonight displays something that's quite extraordinary about being right in the middle of a whole range of different traditions, and Jack embodies those crossroads that he's on there in the central northern Kimberley, the crossroad between the Wandjinas, further to the north, and to the east, the linkages, as you can see, described in the paintings, the canvases, with the Warman connections of the Gidja immediately to the east, and then the linkages, as you can see, with the bold colours and the landscapes with the Fitzroy crossing artists. You can see a range of different traditions that have come together in this crossroads. My wife and I, Jack, were talking about the word stride on the way down in the car, and I wanted to use the word stride. Jack had strides with his personal story. Anne says the word is span or straddles, but I want to describe that age that Jack is of almost the entire contact period for the north central Kimberley that he embodies. That region, that contact is only the life of Jack, 1920s. When the Bunapa resistance collapsed, just a little bit before that, when Jandamara's crowd collapsed, then the movement of the white settlers through to Mengenen country just a little later, and then comes Jack through his linkage to his mother's country and to his white father, Jack Dale. That then reflects in the art the description of the life, the love, the violence, the bloodshed, but the fun of station life, contact life, family life, and cultural life. It's all here on the walls around us, with humour, even amongst the pain and anger that must be on display when you look at some of the items that gently talk about bloodshed and yet do it beautifully as well. The Wandjinas are amazingly depicted not only in the traditional way, but then you look around and see on that wall as you come in on the left, the piece that's now sold, but the Afghan connection, just to think that the Afghans get interpreted through images that are not unlike the Wandjinas and not unlike the animals that are on the landscape. You've got images that are beautiful, all interconnecting and transforming, as someone else has given me the words here tonight. That Gip River Road that Jack's from, the Great Adventure Trail, recently more frequently travelled than it was, is captured on these walls. And for those of us that love that trek, these items are the way of capturing it forever on your own wall, if you're lucky enough to have one. It captures glimpses of the landscape, glimpses of the people, reminders of the Mengenen people and their neighbours, and delivers for anyone who's able to buy these pieces an opportunity to enjoy a piece of that journey that is one of the best journeys. 175 k's just out of Derby, the centre of the Mengenen people's land, that turn off to Mount House, the connection with Glenroy Station, the beautiful big red canvas there. That is a landscape that is unforgettable, with ranges as well as the isolated hills, and Jack's managed to capture it with the markers of landscape, the boulders of landscape and the hills of landscape, connecting up a history and a journey through art, which we're all privileged to delight in. So Jack, I think we all say thank you very much for making this art available to us.
As a child of a black woman and a white man, Jack Dale lived with the constant threat of being abducted by the police and the prospect of forced removal to institutions that neither he or his extended family could have ever conceived. He is as real and as fair dinkum as it gets. Despite an often hard and cruel life, Jack is a naturally joyful man with a keen and delightful sense of humour. But this modern concession is indicative of a trend which saddens and puzzles him. He dismisses many of the paintings done by the younger generation of the Kimberley as Toyota paintings, works not born of knowledge of the law or first-hand experience of years of foot-walking traditional country, but rather of a modern affliction of laziness, indifference and irreverence for one's own culture. When Jack Dale paints, he abhors any kind of distraction, works compulsively and shall continue to do so until it is no longer possible. Jack is now in his late 80s and can be found in and out of hospital. But neither deafness nor an imbalance problem which causes him to stumble and fall affects his sheer determination to record his unique knowledge of the Kimberley, a part of this continent still cloaked in mystery and undiscovered splendour for most of us. Fading indigenous history and culture, white Australian history, geography, anthropology, natural science and humorous anecdotes, all captured in Jack Dale's legacy, this determination will ensure us for coming generations.